Okay, so we have finally reached the last chapter of Genesis. We have finally reached it. It has been a long, long period of study, of conversation, of all of this. And we have reached the final chapter. Thank you so much for hanging in there. If this is your first video, or I don't even know how many it is at this point, I am so super grateful for you tuning in. And I pray that this helped you to understand what you're reading a little bit better, look at it a little bit differently from maybe the way you were taught, that gives you what you need to trust God a little more, to believe a little bit more, to walk in the things that God has called you to walk in. So we are going to jump into the first book of the Bible, the final chapter, chapter 50, and we are going to walk this last thing out. It is verses 1 through 26, okay? So at the end of 49, Jacob has gone ahead and given up the ghost. We said goodbye to Jacob, and we pick up right in verse 1 of chapter 50 where we left off in the last one. So his father has just passed, and verse 1 says Joseph fell upon his father's face. Jacob called all of his sons around, and they're all standing there. He has given them all a word, whether it's positive, negative, or in between. He has given them all a word, and he goes ahead and tells them how he wants his final resting place, where it is, and how they should handle things. And he passes, and after he passes, Jacob falls on him, and he cries and weeps, as you can imagine, when somebody who you've missed for such a huge chunk of your life. This was someone who was monumental. Jacob was a father of 12 sons, but Joseph was the favorite. And so he was the favorite for 17 years, and then he spent, I think, almost 20 years away from his father. And so they just got him back, and he had a few more years with him before he passed. And he is rightfully so mourning. And it says that he commanded the servants, they are in Egypt, to embalm his father, because that is the rule of Egypt. When you are in Egypt, you got to do what the Egyptians do. And also, his father asked to be buried back home. It is a journey to get back home. It is a travel to get back home. And so they had to prepare his body for that. So there are 40 days that this process takes for them to embalm his body and prepare it for burial according to the Egyptian custom. And so so they mourn for 40 days. They mourn for 40 days. They go ahead and let it all out. They can take off of work. They can sit down. They can get whatever they need to get out. They can cry out. Whatever mourning looks like for them, they have a time and a place to do that. And so they do it for 40 days while his body is being prepared for this journey. And so at the end of the 40 days, Joseph goes to Pharaoh. Now, I have said over and over and over again that Joseph is a slave, not was a slave. He is a slave. He belongs to Egypt. This position of power didn't change his ownership. Okay? This position of power didn't change his ownership. In fact, when you look at the 12 tribes following this, when they finally get out of Egypt, there is no tribe of Joseph, because Joseph is a slave and belongs to Egypt. In fact, his sons take his place. So he has to go, and he has to ask Pharaoh for permission to go home and bury his father. Because he is a slave, he cannot just get up and be like, all right, y'all, I'm going to be back. I got to go take care of some stuff at home. He doesn't have that option. Now, because of his position of power, because how he was able to help out Egypt, because he was able to do the things that he was, and this authority that he's been given, of course, he's granted this request, and granted this request royally. So he tells Pharaoh, look, my dad said I got to bury him back home. He gave us very specific instructions. And I'm asking in verse 5, now therefore let me go up. I pray thee. I'm asking you. I beg you. I am requesting from you to bury my father, and I will come again. I will return. The famine is over. He's not currently in charge of that project he was in charge of before. The famine is over. So he's saying, hey, if you let me go, I'll come back. Give me a little weekend pass so I can go take care of this thing, and then I'll be back. He still is owned and has to request just to even leave. And so Pharaoh says, go ahead and do what your father asked you to do. And so the leadership of Egypt went with him, the elders, the servants of Pharaoh, these are royal servants, went with him to travel with him. They travel with him because they're all traveling. They have family and all of those things. And so they're traveling with him to take care of him as he goes. But also just because this person, Joseph, was great in Egypt. Pharaoh really, really appreciated what he had. So when he asked to bury his father, he sent him with like a royal motorcade. This wasn't, go ahead and have a funeral you can afford. This was, let me take care of you. This is, let me make sure that I give you what I have. And so he was given this very royal thing because he's the father of someone who has an authority. He's a father of a important figure in the government of Egypt. So he was given, Jacob was given this royal kind of burial, this royal procession. I'm gonna start over. He was given this royal processional. And so it says in verse 8 that Joseph and all of his brothers, all of his children went. They left only their flocks, their herds, and their little ones. They left because they were planning to come back. They didn't have a reason to leave. They had a new land they were living in. They had plenty of food. They had plenty of what they needed for life. And they were in a good space. At this time, they are not slaves. At this time, they are welcomed visitors. They are a city of people that neighbor this they are like in the suburbs. They're out in a very rural area of Egypt. So they're happy there. And so chariots and a great company, horsemen, everybody's going out. This royal processional happens and they stop. In verse 10, it says they stop and he made mourning for his father 7 days. Along the way, that grief hit. And he mourned 7 more days. He couldn't go forward. He had to take a break and get it out. And for every person who has ever mourned a parent, a child, a loved one, a friend, somebody where you was like, okay, I think I'm okay. And then you get a week down the road, or you get, a month or a year or 2 days through life, and that thing hits you and you got to sit back down again. I will say to you, I am so sorry you know what that feels like. I am so sorry that grief overtook you in that way. I pray that you are able to get it out. I pray that you are able to give it space when it needs space, and you are able to continue your life and allow your life to continue fruitfully. That you don't spend the rest of your years mourning. That you take the time when you need it. He took the time when he needed it, and then he got back up and he continued on with life. That it does not overtake you. I pray that it does not overtake you. I pray that you are able to work through your grief, through your mourning process in the way that you need to process, but you are still able to live because God gave you life. And so, this mourning was unusual to the Egyptians that were traveling with them. It was a lot, and they felt it differently. And they literally marked the place they named the place by this experience they had witnessed, this love overpouring, this grief, this moment, this mourning that was there. It marked them and changed them. And so in verse 13, it says they carried him into the land of Canaan. and they buried him in that same field, in that cave that that Abraham purchased to bury Sarah. And Abraham was later buried by his sons together there. And then Isaac and Rebekah were buried there. And so now Leah was currently buried there, and they are bringing in Joseph to be buried with his wife, Leah. She was given the respect that she was due. It was a little late for some people, but for her, she was given the respect that she was due. She was buried with the wives. Not Hagar's not there, Sarah is. It doesn't matter what else happened. It doesn't matter on those things. She was the first wife. She was the wife of his sons, and she is buried there as such. And then after this burial, in verse 14, Joseph returns to Egypt, and with his brethren, with his brothers and everybody that came with him, with everything. After they buried their father, they made the journey back. But verse 15, we see that the brothers are still afraid. Verse 15 really has them kind of come together. The other brothers, the I'm gonna say the 10, because I don't know if Benjamin's in on this. But the other brothers come together and they're like, look, as long as daddy was alive, I know he wasn't gonna let nothing happen to us. But now that dad is gone, we don't have any protection from that get back that we feel we're due. Sometimes we are carrying the grief, the fear, the guilt, the shame. I'm gonna say fear, guilt, and shame. We are carrying it long after everybody has let it go. And so these brothers are carrying this guilt for what they did. They are like, I know he is going to sell, he's going to get us back for selling him into slavery. He is going to, and there's a guilt that's attached to that because they know they were wrong. And they know if somebody did me like that, I would have got them back. And so they're expecting it from him. And so they send a messenger. They pick somebody to go talk to him on their behalf. And they send this messenger to say, well, when daddy was alive, he said, why you wait this long? Why daddy ain't tell me directly? Why did he wait this long? But they wanted to kind of hold on to that protection because they knew that Joseph would honor his father and honor his father's wishes. So they tried to put on, daddy said, don't get us back for what we did. And Joseph stops them. Joseph stops them. And he says, actually first. So they go, and after they send the messenger, they go to him and they was like, you gotta forgive us. You gotta forgive us and let it go. You can't treat us bad. We'll be your servants. We'll be slaves to you. They were real quick to sell themselves into slavery. Guilt will make you behave less than what you are, less than who you are. Guilt and shame will make you lower yourself in status and position because you feel like you're not worthy, or you're just trying to do enough to get by because you feel like that get back is coming and you want to stay under the radar. That guilt and that shame does not exist in Christ. You are forgiven. You are a new creature. You don't have to live like that. That don't mean be outside. I'm outside now. I can do what I want no. But you are no longer bound to the guilt of your past actions. You are a new creature. Walk in the new. Walk in the forgiveness. Walking in forgiveness means I'm not going to do the thing that I did before. I'm going to be better now because I am better now. So walk in the forgiveness, walk in that new that you are. And so, and don't decide that you have to be less than because of what you used to be. I don't care if you spent 37 years as a crackhead. You're not there anymore. You're a different person. So now let's walk in this forgiveness. The same grace that God gave you for 37 years, you got to give grace to people who were hurt by you for 37 years. You have to give them 37 years worth of grace. You still have to give the people who did you wrong, you got to give them some mercy. You're the same grace and mercy you received, you have to give back. But do not ever put yourself into a position of servanthood unless you are a servant of God. You are not a servant of man. And so Joseph in verse 19 says, Be easy, guys. Don't worry. Don't worry. I am in a place of God. I am in a place of God. Not that he is literally in the position that God holds. Nothing like that. That's not what this is saying. What he's saying is, I'm in a place that God put me in. I am in a position that God put me in. And he literally says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. What you thought was going to be bad for me was not. God meant it for good. And I'm going to read 20 to you. So it says, but as for you, you thought evil against me. You planned something real bad, but God meant it for good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive, to keep people alive, to save the lives of people. Literally, what you meant for evil, God made good for his purpose, for this day and this time, so that I could be in this space, and the same forgiveness that God gave me, the same forgiveness that I gave other people, I'm going to give you. The same forgiveness that God gave you, I'm going to give you. For this time, because of your actions that you thought were bad, I saved the lives of how many people? You can't argue with that. You can't argue with it. You can't be mad. How do you sit in a position of authority? How do you sit in a space where you went from slave to chief in a household to prisoner to chief in the palace? Every time he dipped low, he came up higher. And so, how do you sit in that position and say, nah, I got to get you back? For what? I'm here. Getting you back don't solve nothing. It doesn't change anything. I'm eating real good. You want to play? That's how you have to act. I've always heard the best revenge is living well. Get to where you want to be and treat them the way they should have treated you. They'll do it. That enemy of yours will do the own harm to themselves. But you have the opportunity to. You have the opportunity to restore somebody, give them their faith back, or bring them up. Because when they see that you're not going to get back, they want to know how you got this peace. Why are you not mad? Why aren't you upset? Why aren't you angry in the way that I would be angry? And this is how you win souls. Sometimes it's not even a word you say, it's the life you live. And he is living a life right now. I ain't even mad at y'all. Y'all come on, eat too. And that's literally what he says. He says in verse 21, I will nourish you and your little ones. Oh, I eat good now. Y'all want to play? Oh, don't even worry about it. I got you. For as long as you're here, I'm going to take care of you. He comforted them and spoke kindly to them. The forgiveness that they needed, he gave. Y'all better forgive somebody. You better let that thing go. You live well, and when you fix your plate, fix theirs. And if they're not in a position to receive it, don't even stress yourself about it. You pray that they are next time you fix some plates. So, we're getting ready to say goodbye to Joseph. So, in verse 22, Joseph lived in Egypt 110 years. And he got to see Ephraim, who is his second son, to the third generation. He got to see Ephraim become a great grandfather. So he was a great grandfather. He got to see his sons. He got to see 3 generations of his sons' children. And so, and he got to bring them all up. He got to see them. When it says that they were brought up upon his knees, meaning he got to hold them. He got to care for them. He got to give them hugs and kisses. He got to be pop or granddad. He got to be there for them in that way. And he lived a whole full life. And so in verse 24, he tells his brothers, "Hey, it's almost my time. God is going to take care of you." And he says that God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land into the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. He references the promised land. When God told Abraham everywhere that he walked, he would have that land. When God reinforced that promise to Isaac by giving him a son, or giving him two sons, and then when he reinforced that promise to Jacob by giving him 12 sons, that there was a multiplying effect every time, that they are going to continue to grow and multiply and multiply over and over again, that he's reinforcing this, that there is going to be a time that God is going to visit you and bring you back out of this land, and when he does, he's going to bring you into the promised land. And so then he said, hey, y'all got to promise me. I don't care when that is, but y'all going to bring my bones up out of here. I'm not going to stay here. I understand that this is for a time, but when it's time to go, when we leave this place, I leave with you. I'm an Israelite by birth. Jacob is my daddy by birth. I don't care what I had to live through here. I don't care how they say these rules are going to go, but when it's time to go, I'm going with you. And in verse 26, we say goodbye to Joseph. And it says that he was 110 years old and he was embalmed according to the tradition and law of Egypt. And he was put into a coffin in Egypt. Okay. He doesn't get a burial. He doesn't get to go back home and is rested among with his father and his mother. Okay. So quick recap, and then we are going to go ahead and shut this down. So we see that there is the burial of Jacob. Jacob has passed on. He is buried, and he has requested that he is buried among his among his forefathers. So his father and his grandfather. And Joseph requests that they can go. They leave. They go head out. They bury him in this very royal processional. And along the way, they stop and mourn for 7 more days. Once they get there and bury their father, on the way back, there is a conversation with the brothers, because they feel like Joseph now has the opportunity to get back. And Joseph tells them, what the devil meant for bad, what you promised, what you thought was going to be bad or evil, God used for good. He put me in this place in this time for such a time as this, so that I could save the lives of so many people. And he in fact does. So following that, they come back. He lives to be 110 years old. He gets to see generations of his children be born. And then he passes them. Before he does, he tells them, when y'all leave out of here, when y'all head into this promised land, take my bones with you. Don't let me stay here. So I want you all to remember, forgive somebody. That's it. That's all. Give somebody a little grace, a little mercy, and some forgiveness. Y'all be blessed.